A duke's son leads desert warriors against the galactic emperor and his father's evil nemesis when they assassinate his father and free their desert world from the emperor's rule. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot here today to give you my movie review for 1984's Dune, David Lynch's film, which has grown to be a cult classic. It has a cult following, and we're going to talk about my thoughts on the film, my excitement level for the future of this franchise, and let you know, if you haven't seen this film, if you should check it out in this non-spoiler review. Before we dive into it, as you all can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my other social media accounts. That way you can stay up to date with what's going on here at Movie Files. If you are new to the channel, welcome. Definitely subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Give this video a thumbs up, helps out the channel tremendously, but also really appreciate it. And last but not least, let me know your thoughts. If you've seen this film, let me know if you're a fan of this film, your pros, your cons, if you're excited for Denis Villeneuve's film, if you read the novel. Let's just have some fun conversations in the comments below. So why am I recording a movie review for a film that came out in 1984? So, number one, I am extremely excited for Denis Villeneuve's Dune. If you haven't seen my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2020, half of them are like completely thrown off this year. But so far, Denis Villeneuve's Dune is still scheduled for December, fingers crossed. But, you know, there's also been some rumblings as I'm recording this in mid-August. We supposedly are going to get a trailer for Denis Villeneuve's Dune for the Inception re-release, or Tenet's going to have a trailer for it, so fingers crossed there. I don't think I'm going to be seeing it in my local theater, but I will be checking out that trailer online. So with that kind of being said, it got me excited to rewatch this film. Now, I've seen 1984's Dune, but it was so long ago. This is pretty much this is my first time watching because I was so young. I remember watching this and Blade Runner, being so young and not understanding the film and just not remembering much about it outside of a couple scenes here and there that I remember once I revisited. So we might as well just call this a first-time watch because, again, a lot of this stuff was like 99% of this film was brand new to me. So what is it about 1984 Dune? If you all do not know, this film is directed by David Lynch, who is a blind spot for me. I haven't seen none of his films minus Dune, but I still have to see Elephant Man, Eraserhead, all the, Blue Velvet. There's so many films of his that I have to check out. But this film in particular, if you all do not know, it crashed at the box office. Critics completely destroyed this film for the lack of faith of the source material, the screenwriting, the pacing, the direction, the editing, pretty much the visuals, everything you could think of about a film, they pretty much canned it. But as I had said earlier, it does have a cult following. Some people love this movie, right? And there's those films in the 80s that, don't age that well, whether it be the visual effects, the acting, but they kind of have a spot near and dear to people's hearts. So let's just kind of jump into this review here, starting off with the positives. So first and foremost, again, this is a David Lynch film. Again, this is my first time watching a film of his. He's a visual director, right? He's a unique director from what I understand from his, his previous works. And I've seen one or two episodes of Twin Peaks, so I know he's one of those creative directors. So, I think of 1984. I think of Terminator. I think of Nightmare on Elm Street. I think of Ghostbusters. I think of the Gremlins. There's so many classic films that came out in the 80s. And I think during this time, this film did maybe break new ground, but also had some, as the critics kind of related to, some bad visuals, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But I do applaud some of the direction that David Lynch had. So from the beginning of this film, the opening scene with Virginia Madsen as the princess, as she's explaining the different houses and the understanding spice and understanding Dune, or Arrakis as they call it in this film. And just from Jump Street, you know what kind of film you're getting into if this is your first time watching it. You have these very interesting fade transitions, which just lets you know right off the bat, okay, this is one of those type of films where there's going to be some wacky editing, some creative choices that you may or may not like, but some of that stuff actually kind of grew on me as I rewatched or revisited this film. It's just like, okay, let's roll with it. These weird transitions, this, literally Virginia Madsen's character as a princess literally says, there's a line in the film, and this is a minor spoiler, but as she's explaining, again, the different houses, what the spice is and why it's so important to the galaxy, and whoever owns the spice pretty much is the ruler of the galaxy. She literally has a line in there where she literally says, oh, wait, I forgot. Like, it was just the dialogue from that beginning. I was just like, okay, I can get on board with this kind of cheesiness of this type of film. But transitioning some other things about this movie here, it does do a solid job within the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of explaining the different planets, again, Arrakis, which is Dune, which holds the spice and has the Freeman. You have House Atreides, who are heroes of the story. You have House Harkonnen, who are the villains of the story. So I think the film does a good job of explaining the different houses to a certain extent. You have their sisterhood. You have all these different characters and how they kind of interact with one another. So I think within the first 10 to 15 minutes, it lays the groundwork pretty well in my eyes. I haven't read 1965's Frank Herbert's Dune novel, which, if you all do not know, this film or that book is responsible in inspiring films like Star Wars, Star Trek, and so many other sci-fi epic fantasy things. So this is a very important novel to the science fiction genre as well as fantasy. So I think David Lynch did an okay job. I haven't read the novel, but I can tell he did a solid job of kind of laying out the groundwork to at least let people know that haven't read the book what you're kind of getting into. But that is a book I plan on reading one day. And like I said, if you've read the book, let me know how faithful or lack of faithful it was to the adaptation. Is it a situation where it's like The Shining, right? Where the Arthur of the book of The Shining, didn't like the adaptation that Stanley Kubrick did. So let me know for those again in the comments if it's that kind of situation. But I think the groundwork was laid pretty well. It's unfortunate that it took a while for it to kind of pick up for me. But in that second act, when we get to Arrakis and we get off, off the ships and we're not doing these weird battles and this kind of dry dialogue. Once they get to Arrakis is when the film kind of picks up its vibe, kind of gets a little bit of energy, you get a little bit of the tone, you meet the Fremen, you meet the worms, and you're on Arrakis, which I think that's where the film really kind of picked up for me personally. But that's about the only things I can think of as far as speaking positively about this film. Again, there are some cheesiness to this film. There are some things that I found to be very, creatively speaking, kind of underwhelming, felt rushed at times, the acting at times. We'll get into it in a bit, but there are things that are within that bad realm that I can appreciate. And I've seen some, again, this is an 80s film. There's a lot of 80s films that just don't last the test of time, but there are some bad things I can pick out and put in the positives. But speaking of positives, we got to talk about the negatives. I mean, I can spend 20 minutes talking about, again, the editing, the acting, the direction, the CGI, the practical effects, and all that stuff. But like I said, it took about 45 minutes really to get engaged in the story, which means that the previous 45 minutes minus like the 5-10 minute setup was pretty generic, pretty boring to me. Again, I think of the first scene where we see Paul interacting with Patrick Stewart's character, who's kind of like the person that's a warrior, and he knows all about the fighting and all that stuff, and they're fighting each other with the knives, and you have this like kind of weird CGI block that protects them. It was just stuff like that as an example of just like the boringness and kind of the extreme bad CGI in this film. The acting to me was just so inconsistent. There's literally no character arcs for anyone minus Paul, maybe you can say, but I'm just thinking of examples like Jessica's character, who is Paul's mother, who is in this sisterhood, who has these abilities, and everyone in their inner dialogue, when everyone had a thought, when they're thinking in their heads, I thought that was just so underdeveloped and just extremely cheesy for me when everyone just had the exposition where they're just saying things in their head. But we don't get much from Jessica. Paul's dad, we barely get anything with him. Duncan, Baron, Chani, the Fremens. I mean, there's so many characters. Again, I can tell that this novel has so much richness, so much lore, so much mythology that just felt hollow within this film, that literally no character had a character arc, in my personal opinion. Again, I talked about the CGI being terrible. There are some creative choices that 1984, it was David Lynch's first film. He wrote this film too. There's probably a lot of pressure that he had on him. I believe, if I read something right, the studio really kind of took this film away from him. He didn't have final cut. There was another director that came in and pretty much cleaned up the reshoots and stuff like that. So there were some creative. You can tell that this film was definitely heavily influenced by the creatives during that time. Again, the story at times felt extremely rushed, in my opinion. Paul's journey, who again, Paul is the main character of this film. He's the hero. His hero's journey just felt really underwhelming and extremely fast. We have this 2-year time jump when we see in Paul and the Fremens and his relationship with Chani, how that just came so quickly. It's a montage. You literally see it happen within 2 minutes of the film, which really should have been its own act within the movie. There's moments like that I felt were rushed. The sisterhood, their powers. Paul's sister, she's a powerful sisterhood, and we don't learn much about her. And that third act, to me, was just atrocious. Speaking of Paul's sister, that scene where she's talking to the Emperor in that voice, and her just like the slow motion with the knife in her hand. I mean, there's literally So many scenes. I think of Barton and him when he's on his planet and the oil all over him and pulling the dude's nipples off. There's a lot of creative choices in this film that just felt like what was going on. Again, I can appreciate David Lynch tackling a science fiction film like this had to be very overwhelming, but at the same time, it's just like we've seen other directors like a George Lucas, like I mentioned, James Cameron's Terminator, Ghostbusters. There's films that was their first films, right? And they were able to give us something unique and different and kind of give us something that was entertaining. But I felt like this was just David Lynch. It was a swing and a miss for me personally. But again, there are some moments. Again, I like the setup. I can't wait for the future, which I'll talk about here in a bit. But just giving you all my score for this film, I'll give it a 2 out of 5. It's somewhat of a guilty pleasure film for me. I plan on revisiting this film again closer to the release date. Again, we'll talk about the future and hopefully it comes out this year. But I want to do a watch along for this. I'm gonna get some people that are fans of this film that maybe aren't fans of this film and have a discussion with them. But 2 out of 5 has some moments, has a nice setup. You can tell that there's a lore there. There's a good movie within this film. It's just unfortunately the execution is just terrible throughout the most of the film. The acting, the CGI, the pacing, the editing. A lot of bad going on with this movie. But the future of this franchise is very bright. Denis Villeneuve is my favorite director. I cannot wait for this 2020 version of Dune because I know Denis Villeneuve is going to dive deeper into these characters, the psyche of these characters, the world building, learning more about the sisterhood, learning more about the individual planets and the houses, and characters like I said, Paul's dad, who's going to be played by Oscar Isaac. I know he's going to get more screen time. The Fremen's leader, played by Javier Bardem. I know he's going to get more screen time. Chani, Zendaya, and Paul's relationship. I know they're going to develop more of that. There's an HBO series with their sisterhood, which I imagine is going to be a prequel explaining their powers and how they came to be. So I'm extremely excited for this film. The supporting cast, the ensemble that they have for this new film is just incredible. So even though this film didn't stick the landing, I am really, really excited for this Denis Villeneuve's version. And I plan on reading the book one day because I know, like I said, a lot of people love the novel. They speak so highly about it. And again, without Dune, Star Wars, Star Trek, a lot of our favorite sci-fis would never exist. So 2 out of 5 for Dune, 1984 for me. I plan on doing a watch along one of these days, so look out for that. But let me know in the comments if you read the novel. What is your interpretation of how David Lynch brought the novel to the big screen? Let me know your pros of this movie, your cons of this movie, but more importantly, are you excited for Denis Villeneuve's Dune? Are you looking forward to the trailer? Hopefully by the time I release this video, the trailer will be out or close to being out, and we have more news of the film is coming out this year. But let's have some fun the conversations in the comment section. Thank you all for watching this review. Again, I'm pre-recording this, so hopefully there is a trailer coming out pretty soon. But check out all my content that's available now, and I hope you all are staying safe. Thank you for watching this review, and we'll see you in the next video.